Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 30 of Divine FM. This week I'm going to be talking about understanding life's dualities and being our raw selves. So, this week I wanted to talk about this because I feel as though we're kind of in a shift right now. I guess at least the energy wise of, I say collective very lightly because I know a lot of people don't really understand the whole concept of like the general collective and like people going through the same kind of energy but in like different forms. But I have been very much so feeling like I'm battling between two different parts of myself and trying to understand both of them and giving them both equal amounts of like attention, validity, appreciation, etc. And I've been finding that it's a bit of a struggle because I validate some parts of myself more than the others. And, you know, by diving into that part of myself that I haven't really healed yet and I didn't really know I needed to heal, it's been very eye opening for me to realize that it's so important to understand the dualities of yourself, of, social norms, I guess, of culture, of just absolutely everything. Like, it comes with a yin and a yang. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. And also just the concept of like, that is being your most raw self, is being able to allow yourself to be both sides of yourself, your feminine and your masculine, your yin and your yang, whatever you want, words you want to use to describe that. You're just the parts of yourself that feel like they collide and they clash, but they could still mesh so beautifully and uniquely if we allow them to. And so yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. First, I guess I can start with my highs and my lows. Maybe I'll start with my low just because that's the first thing I can think of. I had sort of a rough weekend. I had a market this past Thursday and I had honestly not great sales, and I was just feeling a little bit low at the market because I was noticing that customers would go to the booth next to mine and they would like, look, walk in, talk, maybe not buy something, but they'll like interact with the booth, and then they'll pass mine and then go to the booth to my right, go, walk in, talk, and like not even making eye contact with me, And that was very like triggering and upsetting for me just because I'm not used to people feeling like the energy felt like people didn't want to see me. They didn't want to look at me. They didn't even want to acknowledge me. And as someone who like tries to acknowledge everyone and just be a kind, gentle soul to everyone, it kind of feels like I'm being kicked down a little bit whenever I'm, I don't know, being purposely ignored. And I mean, I know that those people probably didn't do it to like hurt me or anything, or to like purposely make me feel like they didn't care. It was just that it kept happening like over and over again, and so I had to really come to the realization that there is a problem. Like, there has to be a problem with my energy, or with my booth, or with just like something that's going on with my business. Like, there had to be a problem, and I honestly think it was just because I've been feeling very down and out when it comes to my business, because I work very, very hard at my 8 to 5, and I'm very passionate about it. And I'm also very, very passionate about my side business, and I love doing markets, but I'm also very, very passionate about my podcast, and I'm also very, very passionate about my YouTube channel. And I also have hobbies I do on the side that take my time and that I put in the time and effort to do every day, or at least like keep a routine up for like the sake of my mental, physical, spiritual health. And so with all of that comes so much responsibility to not let myself down, and it's really hard to deal with that emotion as someone who likes to be self-sufficient and extremely hyper independent. I realized that fact itself is one of life's dualities, you know? I appreciate the fact that I'm so self-sufficient and I'm so independent, yet I struggle because I don't like to ask for help because my ego and my subconscious sits in a mindset where I automatically assume people don't want to help me or don't feel like I need help and so they don't offer. But it's literally because I have that energy of I can do it myself and I don't ask for the help, so why would it come, you know? Anyways, sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there, but back to the candles in my market and stuff and my low. Yeah, after the market, my mom actually ended up coming like right before I had to start packing up, and she brought me food to eat because I was so ravenously hungry and just over the day at that point. So it really, really helped my mood that she came and brought me food and helps me pack up. And fast forward to me driving home later on, I hit a really hard bump, and yeah, all of my product broke in my car. Like, all of it. All of my candles, all of my trinket trays. The majority of my glassware that I have for, like, more candles, and also that I use to display my candles, just, I would say probably 90%, maybe more of my inventory was destroyed in, like, a split second. And yeah, that was really hard for me. Like, once I hit the bump and I heard the crash in the back of my car, I just knew that, like, it was bad. And I still had, like, a couple minutes more to drive home, so just that whole rest of the way home, and yeah, seeing all of it being destroyed was a really, really harsh reality to face. But I am proud of myself that I didn't, crash out, really freak out. I immediately was like, okay, let's make a game plan to bounce back and to make this, be worth my while. Because I was thinking I had such an awful market sales-wise. I feel like it had to have been the energy of my business, of the candles, or I don't know what it was, but I'm honestly not mad now that the candles were destroyed because the energy was not awesome. Like, they needed to be destroyed. Whatever energy was clinging onto me and clinging onto my business is now gone. Like, she is gone. But oh my gosh, was that energy attached to me for like quite a few days. I was feeling very, very sad. Like, I wanted to give up on my business. I just was so like devastated because it was partially basically my fault. Like, there was no one's fault except my own, and like I guess the construction and the roads, but like that's all in all my fault. And yeah, that was really hard, but it's okay because I already have a game plan and I'm gonna bounce back. And okay, let me go to my high because I've been talking for literally so long. I would say, oh, duh. Definitely my high was that I was actually sent by my, 8 to 5 on a business trip in Wisconsin to do, a factory tour and training at this company that we rep. And that was, I have no words to describe how fulfilling of an experience that was for me. I feel like I genuinely walked out of Wisconsin or flew out of Wisconsin a new, refreshed, and much more intelligent version of myself than I was 3 days prior. I genuinely just fell back in love with the industry that I'm working in. I love, a challenge, and I love that every day that I go to work, and especially on that training, I was in very, very new, scary, kind of out of my comfort zone territory for me, yet I fit right fucking in, and I just did so much better than I could have ever imagined myself. And it just really proves to myself that I no longer need to fear, events or, trips or really anything like just going somewhere that's out of my comfort zone is like scary. I have so much more faith in myself now to be able to succeed and to, have confidence that I have so much intelligence and I have so much wit and I have so much kindness and goodness and love and just I'm the full package. I'm the it girl and I feel so much confidence in that fact. And I love it. Like I just love being me and I feel like I've been through enough situations now, especially going to this business trip, that I feel like a very strong, confident, and powerful ass woman. Yes, indeed. So yeah, it really just makes my low seem like nothing because I genuinely am doing so well in life and I'm so fulfilled and happy regardless of the few, obstacles or little downfalls that happen, I'm so much more than capable to bounce back even better than before because I have again and again and again. So yeah, I'm feeling awesome and let's start the pod now. So yeah, I guess I kind of already went into the topic a little bit earlier whenever I was talking about my low and like duality, but I also wanted to talk about just a few different things that I know a lot more people will relate to, I guess, or just maybe have questions about. So I have a couple of just like bullet points about things that have dualities, and as I read them out, I feel like I'll just get a few ideas of exactly like what I want to share because it's quite a lot of things. So I wrote jobs, hobbies, creativity, personal goals, social life, spirituality in spiritual/religious practice, health, mental health, family, setbacks and hardships, trauma, grief, shame, loneliness, all kind of have to go with that setbacks and hardships, your relationship with yourself and your higher power, your sense of peace or lack thereof, love and its presence or impact in your life, and etc. So those are just a couple of things that I could think of that are on my mind or just in my subconscious like pretty regularly, that I have, differing beliefs and ideas about myself that are both valid and are both accurate, but one impacts me positively and one impacts me negatively, or at least subconsciously. That's how I perceive them. So I guess let's just start with job. I'll go through these quick because I already kind of talked about a few. So your job, if you've listened to my podcast for a while, you know that I have been having doubts about my 8 to 5 job because, part of me wants to just dive straight into my creative practice and just do like my podcast and my YouTube channel and my side business. Like ideally, I feel like a part of me would love to do that full time. But also a part of me knows that I have so much larger goals than what my hobbies can attain for me right now. But I do know that by putting in time to my 8 to 5 and going in with the intention of knowing that it's going to positively impact me, going to positively impact my future family, it's going to positively impact my current family members. I plan to pay off like my debt and anyone's in my family's debt that I possibly can in the future. Like I truly have so many goals that have to do with like financial freedom, for example, that I just know I have to have grit and I can't give up when it comes to diving into that part of myself that likes to be challenged. On the flip side, a part of me that I don't value as much is my creativity and my peace and my relaxation time. I feel like I've really been having to reteach myself what productivity means, and just being okay with doing nothing and being okay with not actively putting my energy towards something and instead resting and instead putting my energy towards me or my crafts or just reading, doing things that I love and make me feel calm. I have to remember that those parts are just as important as me being my very masculine side of myself, my very productive side of myself that is very hyper independent and, go getter. Yes, that's awesome, but if I only lean into that part of myself, eventually something's going to come up that's going to cause me to feel shameful for not being productive. And that's counterproductive to actively know that there's parts of me that I don't value as much, but I am capable of finding value within that. I just have to do shadow work, basically, when it comes to appreciating every part of me. And with that comes, a lot of confusion when it comes to just understanding who I am. Like, I feel like I've had a lot of ego deaths recently, and it's both devastating and calming at the same time to know that I can be whoever I truly want to be and that I have the opportunity to really be my raw, authentic self if I, choose to allow myself to do so. So I actually have a little excerpt from this book called A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. I wanted to read about it. It's basically talking about this and just the concept of letting go of self-definition. I usually congratulate people when they tell me, I don't know who I am anymore. Then they look perplexed and ask, are you saying it is a good thing to be confused? I ask them to investigate. What does it mean to be confused? I don't know is not confusion. Confusion is, I don't know, but I should know. Or, I don't know, but I need to know. Is it possible to let go of the belief that you should or need to know who you are? In other words, can you cease looking so conceptual definitions to give you a sense of self? What the fuck? What does that even mean? Hold up, let's read that sentence again. Can you cease looking to what? Can you cease looking to conceptual definitions to give you a sense of self? Wow. Okay, now that makes sense. That's a really powerful sentence. Can you cease to look for conceptual definitions to give you a sense of self? I.e., I am hyper-independent. That would be a conceptual definition to give me a sense of self. Saying, I'm only hyper-independent, and if an opportunity comes where I can't be hyper-independent, then I'm going to feel of less value. Does that make sense? Instead, appreciating both the yin and the yang of me feeling like I am very much so capable of doing everything myself, but also allowing my femininity to creep in and ask for help, or to just give off the energy that if there's people here who see me doing something or can just tell that I need help, they'll help me, It's really just your perception of it, You can change your subconscious like that. Can you cease looking to thought for an identity? When you let go of the belief that you should or need to know who you are, what happens to confusion? Suddenly, it is gone. When you fully accept that you don't know, you actually enter a state of peace and clarity that is closer to who you truly are than thought ever could be. Defining yourself through thought is limiting yourself. Of course, different people fulfill different functions in this world. It cannot be otherwise. As far as intellectual or physical abilities are concerned, knowledge, skills, talents, energy levels, human beings differ widely. What really matters is not what function you fulfill in this world, but whether you identify with your function to an extent that it takes you over and becomes a role that you play. When you play roles, you are unconscious. When you catch yourself playing a role, that recognition creates a space between you and the role. It is the beginning of freedom from that role. When you are completely identified with the role, you confuse a pattern of behavior with who you are, and you take yourself very seriously. See, that is a really good sentence too. When you are completely identified with a role, you confuse a pattern with who you are, and you take yourself very seriously. So, yeah, another thing, like whenever it comes to, I was talking about my low earlier, how whenever all of my inventory was destroyed, I wanted to give up because I felt like I was a failure for destroying all of my inventory, and then also already not having a good market. And I was already thinking in my brain, like, there's something wrong with me because no one's coming to my market. And then, of course, I'm being more careless with my driving, and then I ruined my inventory, I had assigned an idea to my business. I literally did it earlier too, that I just felt like there was negative energy attached to me, attached to my business. But I was identifying with that. I could have easily just not taken people's actions towards me the way that I did, but because I was identifying with a certain version of events, thus I perceive them a certain way. Does that make sense? All right, let's continue. You also automatically assign roles to others that correspond to yours. For example, when you visit doctors who are totally identified with their role, to them you will not be a human being, but a patient or a case history. Although the social structures in the contemporary world are less rigid than in ancient cultures, there are still many pre-established functions or roles that people readily identify with and which thus become part of the ego. This causes human interactions to become inauthentic, dehumanized, and alienating. Those pre-established roles may give you a somewhat comforting sense of identity, but ultimately you lose yourself in them. The functions people have in hierarchical organizations, hierarchy, but like plural, such as the military, the church, a government institution, or a large corporation, easily lend themselves to becoming role identities. Authentic human interactions become impossible when you lose yourself in a role. Some pre-established roles we could call social archetypes. To mention just a few, the middle-class housewife, the tough macho male, the female seductress, the nonconformist, artist or performer, a person of culture, a role quite common in Europe, who displays knowledge of literature, fine art, and music in the same way others might display an expensive dress or car. And then there is a universal role of an adult. When you play that role, you take yourself and life very seriously. Spontaneity, lightheartedness, and joy are not part of that role. The hippie movement that originated on the west coast of the United States in the 1960s and then spread throughout Western world came out of many young people's rejection of social archetypes of roles, of pre-established patterns of behavior, as well as egoically based social and economic structures. They refused to play their roles their parents and society wanted to impose on them. Significantly, it coincided with the horrors of the Vietnam War, in which more than 57,000 young Americans and 3 million Vietnamese died, through which the insanity of the system and the underlying mindset was exposed for all to see. Whereas in the 1950s, most Americans were still extremely conformist in thought and behavior. In the 1960s, millions of people began to withdraw their identification with a collective conceptual identity because the insanity of the collective was so obvious. The hippie movement represented a loosening of the hitherto rigid, egoic structures in the psyche of humanity. I've never heard of that word. Hitherto. Hitherto. What is the definition of that word? I need to know. Until now, or until the point in time under discussion. Okay, let's read that again. The hippie movement represented a loosening of the hitherto. I hope I'm not butchering that. Like, I know I am, but I'm sorry. At least I looked up the definition. Rigid, egoic structures in the psyche of humanity. The movement itself degenerated and came to an end, but it left behind an opening, and not just in those who were part of the movement. This made it possible for ancient Eastern wisdom and spirituality to move west and play an essential part in the awakening of global consciousness. If you are aware enough, to be able to observe how you interact with other people, you may detect subtle changes in their speech, attitude, and behavior depending on the person you're interacting with. At first, it may be easier to observe this in others. Then, you may also detect it in yourself. That way in which you speak to the chairman of the company may be different in subtle ways from how you speak to the janitor. How you speak to a child may be different from how you speak to an adult. Why is that? You're playing roles. You're not yourself, neither with the chairman, nor with the janitor, nor with the child. When you walk into a store and buy something, when you go into a restaurant, the bank, the post office, you may find yourself slipping into pre-established social roles. You become a customer and speak and act as such, and you may be treated by the salesperson or waiter who is playing a role as a customer. A range of conditioned patterns of behavior come into effect between two human beings that determine the nature of the interaction. Instead of human beings, conceptual mental images are interacting with each other. The more identified people are with their respective roles, the more inauthentic the relationships become. You have a mental image not only of who the other person is, but also of who you are, especially in the relation to the person you're interacting with. So you are not relating with that person at all, but who you think you are is relating to who you think the other person is, and vice versa. The conceptual image your mind has made of yourself is relating to its own creation, which is the conceptual image it has made of the other person. The other person's mind has probably done the same, so every egoic interaction between two people is in reality the interaction between four conceptual mind-made identities that are ultimately fictions. It is therefore not surprising there is so much conflict in relationships. There is no true relationship. Whew! So, I wanted to read that because I feel like it has really, really good tidbits when it comes to socializing, and when it comes to not just socializing with people, but like with our family and with ourselves, and with, if we believe in a higher power. Our ego has such a big role to play whenever it comes to appreciating ourselves, appreciating the world around us, and appreciating, the life we were given. And there's just so many like complex topics that have to do with life's dualities, and of course the ego, and of mirroring each other. But in the end, they all have the same idea, and that is appreciating the yin and the yang, and accepting that you can only have light with darkness, and vice versa. I feel like, let me go with mental health and physical health. For example, I was just talking to my dad about this earlier, how I've gone through phases of valuing working out very much so. And for a while, actually, I feel like I identified with the idea of being like a quote unquote like gym girl or whatever. Like, I went to the gym so much that it became almost a personality trait of mine. And I started to like cringe myself out almost, because I am so much more complex than just going to the gym, like, yeah. And so when I realized that I was putting so much of my value into like my physical health, I realized that I wasn't valuing my mental health, for example, because I wasn't taking enough breaks. I was drinking way too much caffeine. I wasn't getting enough sleep. I was overworking myself, and once I started to implement little changes, I go to the gym a little bit less time now, and sometimes I take one more rest day, or instead of, resting, I just won't go to the gym, but I'll like go on a walk. Like today, I'm recording my podcast, and so it's gonna be quite late by the time I'm done. I've already eaten dinner. I've already kind of settled for the night, and I don't really feel like raising my heart rate again for the night, because I go to bed quite early. And so instead, I'm just gonna go and walk the dogs for like an hour, And I value that very much so, like almost more than the workout I did yesterday. which was such a good workout. Like, I even did more than I planned to do when I went to the gym. Yet, I I can literally tell you right now, I value my rest and my calm gym days. Like, even if I just do some yoga or something, your body needs different things every day. And it also has to do with your mental health, you know? If I want to go and raise my blood pressure, I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight, you know? I'm going to feel anxious. I'm, of course, going to get a good workout in, maybe, but I know myself. And I know that I need more rest when it gets to later in the night. So that's why I usually work out, like, right whenever I get home. And I just really had to do a little bit of shadow work before I really came to that conclusion, was able to create a good routine for myself that was healthy and balanced and still made me feel like I was being productive when it came to my physical health, but also made me feel like I wasn't letting myself down when it came to my mental health. So we love that. And maybe one more thing I wanted to talk about too is your relationships with others and your relationship with yourself. So first, I guess I already kind of talked about your relationship with yourself, but mostly your relationship with others and the duality of it being a hard interaction, a scary interaction, a good interaction, like an anxious interaction. Like, I feel like I've had a really good combo of all of the above, and I feel like most of it really just comes down to how willing we are to let love in, and that comes down to how willing you are to love yourself and to see yourself and then to see others, you know. In the excerpt I read earlier, it was basically talking about the concept of being each other's mirror, and same thing has to do with love and, of course, your relationships with others. Like, if you can't give yourself a certain amount of love, it is physically impossible to expect yourself to be able to give that to someone else, because let's say you do love someone else more than you love yourself, you're gonna burn out. Eventually, that's like, it's not sustainable, you know? And so that's why people always say, you know, love yourself before you go into a relationship and love another, because you can only love another as much as you love yourself. And it's a little bit deeper than that, because it's not just loving yourself and like all the parts about yourself that everyone sees and the parts of yourself and your personality that you identify with, but also your dark side and the parts of yourself that you don't show as much and you feel shame about and grief about, and you feel like you are a work in progress, per se, when it comes to those parts about yourself. Those are also, if anything, more so, you should love those parts more, because they need they need more love than your other parts, you know? If you are like a stereotypically pretty person, let's say, or handsome person, you don't need the validation from others all the time to remember that you're pretty or handsome, you know? But you may feel insecure about, let's say, I don't know, you're lonely. Let's say you don't have that many people around you because you feel like no one understands you, and you are like a fairly happy person, you know, like everything is going good for you, but you just have that deep sense of loneliness. That is an insecurity that you can't expect people to validate for you, but no one sees it. It's like a hidden wound. And so whenever you go into a relationship with someone, per se, that wound will come out. And if, let's say, that person that you're with is like busy or something and doesn't respond back, and then that loneliness wound comes out and you're like, oh my gosh, they are going to leave me, they don't like me, I'm just going to be alone again, and you like already feel like it's the end of the world because you haven't learned to love and appreciate the concept of that pain and sitting with it and hugging yourself and being able to confidently know that when you feel those feelings of loneliness, that you will be able to self-soothe yourself out of those feelings, because you cannot expect someone else outside of you to constantly, you know, cure you, to to be your medicine. You have to learn to be your own medicine if you want to truly, be the same for others. If you want to be mean to others, fuck it. Like, doesn't really matter how you treat yourself if you don't want to be good to others. But who's actually like that? I ain't talking to people who are like that on my podcast, so it's kind of irrelevant. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to be able to love the hardest parts about you if you want to be able to have a true, deep, passionate, like, authentic relationship with yourself and others. Because if the dark parts about the other person comes out that they feel shame about, and maybe you also feel like they should feel shame about it, or maybe if you don't feel healed when it comes to not liking those parts about yourself that are, shameful per se or whatever. I hope this is making sense. If you haven't already attained that ability, you will hurt that other person, and it's just the smarter thing to do is to heal ourselves before we, put ourselves into that position where we're like, purposely doing things that could hurt others and that could, hurt ourselves and set ourselves back when it comes to our progress, when it comes to our involvement in our mentality, like, it's hard to always choose the right thing when it comes to yourself, but once you start doing it and you see let's say the outcome, the positive outcome from making those right decisions for yourself, it's never ever again going to be the first choice to go back. Once you start going the right way, it doesn't really make sense to go backwards, at least in my head. So yes, I really hope that made sense, that last little tidbit I was talking about. I was really trying to explain that concept of, like, loving your dark side and, like, doing the shadow work, and I just feel like I kept going on tangents. So if so, I'm sorry. I'm gonna end off the podcast though reading this chapter from this book called Love and Awakening by John Welwood. I don't think I'm actually going to read the whole chapter, just like 4 pages. And it's talking about this concept, and it's really beautiful, and yeah, I hope you guys like it. This chapter is called Lead into Gold. As two people's love for each other penetrates their hardened defenses, it brings to light hidden negativities, raw edges in themselves and in their relationship that they would rather keep hidden away in the dark. When we live alone, we develop strategies for ignoring these raw edges. But when we live with someone we love, we can no longer hide from ourselves like this. It is important to let these negativities come out into the open, where we can work with them in the light of awareness and compassion. Only then can they relax their anxious grip, yielding access to hidden resources that they have been blocking. If we always try to avoid the darker aspects of ourselves, they remain underground and never evolve in a more positive direction. Even worse, they start to fester and spread, eventually contaminating our whole relationship or our whole life, like poison seeping into groundwater. Learning to work directly with negativity is an essential step on the path of conscious relationship. Often, when our shadow side comes to light, we criticize ourselves or our partner for bringing out the worst in us. Yet, blame is just another form of negativity, which only aggravates the situation. Whenever we turn against something negative in ourselves or our partner, we are essentially contracting against a contraction, effectively tightening the knot rather than letting it unravel. Let's read that again. Whenever we turn against something negative in ourselves or our partner, we are essentially contracting against a contraction, effectively tightening the knot rather than letting it unravel. In fact, our aversion to a negative feeling often contains and thus identifies the very quality we are trying to push away. Censoring our anger, for instance, is a further act of aggression. Denying our fear is a further expression of fear. Blaming ourselves for being stingy is ungenerous and only makes us hold on more tightly. Our adversive reactions to our dark side keeps us stuck in the very tendencies that cause us the most pain. Often what keeps us from acknowledging our negative tendencies is a fear of being judged for them. Perhaps we imagine our partner will no longer respect us if we reveal our flaws or limitations, but this is usually a projection. We are seeing our own critic, the part of ourselves that condemns us for being human, all too human, in our partner's eyes. Before we can work creatively with negativity, we must first learn to neutralize the attacks of our inner critic. As a step in this direction, it is important to make a crucial distinction between discernment and condemnation. We need to be able to discern whatever truth there is in the critic's message, which may be trying to tell us where we are off the mark, while putting aside the tendency to condemn ourselves for our failings. This means learning to stand up to the critic's attack, firmly saying no to its censure, while at the same time recognizing that it is trying to bring to our attention. Yes, it's true. I am often lost and out of touch. I try to use my partner to fill up my holes and to shore up my ego. I have a hard time really listening. When I give, I am often looking for something in return. When we can gently admit to ourselves when we are off the track, when we are off track, we take away the critic's ammunition. If contracting against negativity only creates more negativity, the opposite is also true. Acknowledging it diminishes its power, revealing positive impulses concealed within it. Let's read that again. If contracting against negativity only creates more negativity, the opposite is also true. Acknowledging it diminishes its power, revealing positive impulses concealed within it. For example, perhaps your relationship brings to light your tendency to be selfish. If you attack yourself for this, then it only goes underground, becoming more furtive and entrenched. What's needed instead is a deeper understanding of the selfishness, what it consists of and where it comes from. In truth, you probably don't know why you're selfish or even why this selfishness really is, or what this selfishness really is. You may have theories about it, but you probably never looked into it that deeply, and it will never really change or evolve until you do. The key once again lies in allowing an injury. Allowing does not mean acting out of impulse. Instead, it means letting your experience be there, just as it is, and touching it directly. Both of the allowing and the touch should be gentle. This takes practice, steadfastness, and courage. When you let yourself experience the selfish impulse as it arises, noticing how it feels in your body, you may find a certain sensation connected with it, perhaps a tightness in the belly or chest. Looking further, you see that this contraction indicates something inside you that is desperately trying to hold on, and that underneath this grasping there is a tremendous hunger. In acknowledging this, you may find the tightness starting to ease. Then, if you explore the underlying sense of hunger to see where it's coming from, you may realize that you are not very generous with yourself, which creates an inner sense of poverty. As a result, you always try to get what's coming to you. In recognizing your grasping as an attempt to remedy a sense of poverty, you start to bring compassionate understanding to what is going on inside of you, instead of simply condemning it, and remaining divided against yourself. Then you can also address the real issue, the need to be more generous with yourself instead of unconsciously acting out through selfish behavior. Even though negative tendencies do not always open up like this right away, they eventually will if we keep inquiring into them without blame. All negativity is the result of some loss of being. When we discover how we are disconnected from ourselves, we see our negativity for what it really is, a cry for attention for some part of us we've forgotten, which we can only recover once we've recognized it's been lost. Well, how do you guys feel? I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. I feel happy to be done. I really wanted to talk about this, and I was kind of stressed out because it is kind of a complex concept, but it really resonated with me, and I hope it resonated with you guys. Anyways, till next time.